Hi, I'm Dr. Gia, physician researcher. If you're like most researchers, you know that conducting a literature review can be one of the toughest part of the job. It's time consuming and usually there's no real guidance. So I'm sharing a step-by-step roadmap on how I conduct literature review during the manuscript writing phase. And this is taken straight from my academic writing course. I will explain what literature review means, specifically knowing the difference between the product versus process. I will talk about the actual process of it from developing a search strategy, the actual search, reading the paper, collating and synthesizing the paper, and keeping things organized. So let's get started. We will be talking about conducting literature review for the manuscript writing phase. So in this module, we have several objectives. The first is to understand what literature review means, separating the process versus the product, okay? Understanding how to conduct a literature review that's specifics to supporting manuscript writing, develop skills to organize and synthesize the most relevant studies to support the manuscript's argument, learn how to efficiently update, manage, and integrate literature throughout the manuscript writing process, and finally, strategies to stay organized and easily reference literature when drafting different sections of the manuscript. Okay, the first really important concept is to know the difference between the product versus process. Because when you Google, you search YouTube, you're going to see a lot of things like, oh, what's literature review, how to make it easy. Sometimes they're referring to literature review the product, and sometimes they're talking about literature review the process. You need to know the difference on which is the one you're trying to improve, okay? When we are talking about literature review the product, it's typically a written summary of the key literature and sources that is relevant to your topic. It outlines the current state of the field, highlights gaps or problems that your research addresses. It comes in several forms. It could be a chapter in a thesis. This is the most common one. You say, oh, how do I write a literature review portion of my thesis? But actually we see it in everywhere else. So it could be a section in an original research paper, usually in the introduction or the discussion section, though they don't call it the literature, they don't name it the literature review, but the whole area, maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs, is basically the literature review. In journals, if it's a full paper that's a literature review, it's often called a narrative review or a review paper. Okay. And now as the process, what's the process on the right here? The process involves searching, evaluating, and synthesizing existing studies on your research topic. This process is iterative, where you refine your search as your understanding grows or new studies are published. And the goal is to critically assess the current knowledge, highlight key findings, and also identify gaps that your research can address. For manuscript writing, this means focusing on targeted studies that directly support or challenge your work. So why is literature review important for manuscript writing? So first is it helps position your work within the current body of knowledge. It demonstrates how your study builds on or challenges existing research and why it really matters. And the goal is to ensure you're reviewing the most pertinent studies that directly support your manuscript's specific aims, hypothesis, and also the findings. You'll need to refine your search terms to capture studies that frame your research question in the introduction, support the methods and statistical methods in approaches in the methods, and also to compare your results to existing findings in the results and discussion section. How is literature review different during the manuscript writing phase from the idea generation phase? It's slightly different in terms of approach and the process. In the idea generation phase, the review is typically broad and exploratory because here the goal is to identify gaps in developing a research question. Now, in the manuscript writing phase, you have done all the prep work, you've done all your data collection, now you have results. And the review is now more targeted and focused. It's aimed at finding or choosing the most relevant studies to support your research findings, methods, and also conclusion. I know conducting a research project is an overwhelming process, so I made the idea to paper blueprint for you. This blueprint takes you through a 7-step process from the idea generation phase to the paper submission phase. Plus, you'll get my free 5-day email course, Jumpstart Your Academic Writing. We will cover mindset, key writing tips, how do you beat writer's block, and more. So click on the link in the description below. Okay, now let's talk about developing a targeted search strategy for each manuscript section. Now, this is one of the big problems. People downloading a lot of papers and then they get overwhelmed. So before you download hundreds of paper, first do this. I want you to come up with a game plan. This is really important. Why do you need a search strategy for literature review? This is to avoid random article hunting. So you need to have a clear game plan. And a good strategy saves time and ensures that you find relevant articles. And also, third, you know what you're looking for before you start downloading papers. So the first step is to define the purpose of the papers you need. So in the introduction section, let's go section by section, okay? In the introduction section, you will need typically papers that define the problem or show the extent of the issue. You also need papers that identify the study gap in existing research. And now in the method section, you will need papers or references that justify the variables you've chosen or papers that support the methods you're using. In the discussion section, papers that support your findings or provide evidence, papers that contradict your results or to explore alternative interpretations, and also finally papers that explain possible mechanisms behind your findings. Then step 2 is to target the right type of articles. So there are several types of articles. You have original research articles, and these are the most commonly cited ones. The most commonly articles that you use in your references. Because the goal is to provide primary data and new findings, because they form the core evidence for your review. Then the second group, smaller group, review articles. These are papers that offer comprehensive overview of a topic. It helps you understand the broader landscape or identify trends. Typically, you don't refer this directly or cite this in your paper, but these good landscape papers where you can find that can point you to the right direction on the primary source of the results. And then third are theoretical papers. These are good for qualitative studies. They present concepts, frameworks, or even models that can guide your interpretation or theoretical approach. And then finally, methodological papers. These are papers that describe and evaluate specific research methods, and you're very useful when you're justifying or refining your research design as you're writing the method section. Okay, so this is an example as I am preparing my search strategy for the introduction section. Okay, so I know, okay, this is the time I'm working on a paper, the introduction of my paper on delirium in AKI patients. So I know that I need articles that, number one, define problems of AKI and delirium. And then I probably need a paper that identify the gaps in the literature on both incidence and outcomes of delirium in AKI patients. I will also need original research articles to show recent data on delirium rates. I need review articles to also understand what's been studied so far. So when I form the paragraph, it's more cohesive. Okay, so now another example for method section. Okay, so now let's say I'm working on the method section on my paper, same example, AKI and delirium. And so in this method section, I need to find papers that justify the variables I'm using. For example, I chose blood pressure, age, certain inflammatory markers. So I need another paper to say, oh, this is based on previous studies. I will also look for methodological papers that support my use of logistic regression for analysis. Sometimes very common analysis, you don't need a methodological paper. It's more likely it's something a bit fancier and not so conventional, which needs more explanation. Third, I want to search for articles that describe the statistical methods used in similar studies on AKI and delirium outcomes, and also find papers that justify the inclusion and exclusion criteria I'm using for patient selection. Again, these are very subjective. If it is a common method, a very conventional method, usually you don't need any justification, but sometimes if it is a model or a specific statistical method, I would recommend putting references for it. Now, the third example, this is the discussion section. Okay, typically this is the most comprehensive one and the most difficult part. Okay, so I would need to find papers that support my findings, that show a similar association between acute kidney injury and delirium. Okay, I want to search papers that contradict my findings to provide alternative interpretations or explanations. I want to look for maybe theoretical papers or mechanistic studies that explore the possible biological mechanisms linking acute kidney injury and delirium. I also need review articles that discuss broader implications for patient care, which I can reference when discussing potential impact of my findings. So with these three examples, I'm just going to I wanted to show you how I kind of think through my strategy. So I don't just go in and open PubMed or Google Scholar and randomly find. I really come in with ideas. Okay, now that you have a search strategy, let's look into the actual steps of searching for articles. Okay, so when we search for articles, okay, first question is where do you find them? The traditional one, we have to think about a few layers. First is a search engine. Google Scholar is a search engine, so you can, but specifically for scholarly articles. Then the next one are index database. So index database are database that have systematic collection of articles. They have a PMID. They have a specific ID for each article. Okay, you can use PubMed or Web of Science. Right now, PubMed at the back end has AI tools to actually make the best match article even more robust. And then we have now newer AI tools. These are literature connectors. Why do I call them connectors? Is because later I will show you a walkthrough of how it looks like. But basically, if you find an article, it will map out visually what are the articles that have cited them, or what these articles are similar that has been connected to other references. So instead of manually looking at each reference, it visually shows you what are the connection, and you can actually download the paper. These three are very similar. Research Rabbit, this is free. Litmap, you have to pay, but it has more features. And then you also have connected papers. Now, the second question is how to find relevant articles. Now, I'm going to give you like 5 main key things. So first is to use keywords, okay? Second is to use the cited by feature. The third is reference list. Fourth, related articles or similar authors. So first is search by keywords. This is really important as you do literature review at the start. Usually the biggest problem is either too wide, you put the keyword and you get too many articles, or too narrow, too few articles, or third, the issue is not relevant. So you get a bunch of articles, but it's not the right one. So choosing the right keywords is really important. Now, as you think through the keywords, you have to think through different terms that could represent the same topic. For example, I want to study end-stage renal disease, but there are several terms that could be used by other researchers. As time evolved, terminology changed. In the past, we used to call it end-stage renal disease, and now it's updated to end-stage kidney disease. And then the newest update was kidney failure. But sometimes in other literature, they call it chronic kidney disease stage 5, and sometimes some certain articles only talk about dialysis. So because there's like 4 or 5 different potential words that could potentially represent the same topic, you want to be at the back of your mind, okay, what are the potential keywords I need to use? Now, the second thing, when it comes to keyword, is to learn to use the right Boolean operators. I know it sounds really complicated and all, but really these are just communication tools to talk to the databases on what you want or don't want. It helps you refine and filter the articles you want. So there are 4 main ones. First, you have and, okay, capital letter, or, not, and quotation marks. Okay, so first one is and. And it is, when you use and, it is used to narrow search results by requiring that all specific terms appear in the search results. For example, when you search for acute kidney injury and delirium, we'll give you results that mention both acute kidney injury and delirium together. So it helps you focus on more relevant studies. So when you think about Venn diagram, it's like 2 circles and it's the one right in the middle. Okay, now the next one is or. This is used to broaden search result by including records that contain any of the specified terms. So when you use or between words, the search will return results that include either or both terms. For example, searching for acute kidney injury or delirium will show you studies that mention either acute kidney injury, delirium, or both, and that gives you a wider range of results. Okay, the third Boolean operator is not. It is used to exclude certain terms from your search results. And when you use not, the search will return records that contain one term but exclude those that mention the specified term after not. Okay, so for example here, searching for acute kidney injury, not dialysis, will show results related acute kidney injury, but will exclude anything that also mentions dialysis. So it helps you narrow down research results by filtering out irrelevant studies. And then the fourth one is quotation marks. Quotation marks are used in searches to find exact phrases. So when you put keywords inside quotation marks, the search will return results that contain the words in the exact order and form. So for example, if I want to search acute kidney injury, okay, I put the quotation mark, it will show only results where these three words appear together in that specific sequence. If not, the search may include this topic, injury prevention strategies in athletes with kidney conditions. Just because you have injury and kidney mentioned in the same sentence, but it's technically not related to acute kidney injury. So you don't want an article that has this title. Okay, now after talking about keywords and using the right Boolean operators, the one that we see often is also that's really useful, cited by or related articles. Okay, I'll show you a walkthrough in a bit. But when you see cited by, okay, you see it in Google Scholar and PubMed. So basically, they're referring to the number of times a particular article has been referenced or cited by other academic papers, books, or articles. And this gives you an idea of the article's impact and influence within the academic community. Sometimes they will see, oh, cited by 200 people, 800, 1,000, sometimes only 2 citations. It gives you an idea, oh, is this a high impact paper, maybe a low impact paper, high influence when you see a large number of citations. Then the next concept is the related articles, okay, or similar articles. This is a feature that provides a list of studies that are similar to the ones you're viewing. And these articles are typically connected by topic, keywords, methodology, or even or citations. All right, now I'm going to walk through how it looks like in terms of key search term, Boolean operators, and also cited by through Google Scholar and PubMed. Now, I would like to do a walkthrough of PubMed on how to conduct a literature review. I'll use the topic of acute kidney injury and delirium. So I'll type AKI and delirium. Let's see what shows up. Okay, now, so here, these are all the articles that come up, okay? And a few things I want to highlight. First is here, the most recent, okay, sort by. There are many ways to sort by. Most recent, publication date, author, journal, a best match, okay? So best match is PubMed's, right now it uses AI tool to find the best match for you, all right? So I want to highlight a few things. First, I use the AKI instead of acute kidney injury, okay? And because of that, look at my title. It's not really capturing the topics I want. So they talk about intensive care. The reason this come up is AKI usually ends up showing in abstract because it's one of the minor points. So you're getting some articles here that talks about acute kidney injury within, but the titles are not really capturing what I really want. Okay, so I'm going to change this, call it acute kidney injury. Let's see what changes. Okay, now I have a better match, acute kidney injury as risk factor for delirium. This is what I want. Okay, so this is first. I'm going to walk you through to the left here. And as you go through, PubMed is really powerful. You can, choose by only abstract, only full text articles. Here you can choose the type. You want clinical trial, meta-analysis, review, systematic review. You have additional filters here. Now, anything else? I'm going to show you the advanced search. Look here, advanced search. Okay. As I type here, there are a few things. Remember we learned about Boolean operator? You can type N here. It actually shows up as N within the search. But if you're not sure, you can also click add with N or not. Okay. Let's go back to the search. All right. Other things that you could also look at include, let's click on one article. Okay, let's say you like this article. Then on the right here, these are some page navigation. Okay, you have title and authors, abstract, figures, comments. Here are three really important ones. Similar articles, cited by, and references. Okay, when you click similar articles, these are articles that are very similar to the one you've chosen. And let's go back up again. Cited by. So these are articles that are currently citing this paper. So again, these are networks of articles that are somewhat related. And then the third one, the references. These are the references that has been used in this paper. So that's a good way to think about all the adjacent articles that could be relevant to your topic of interest. Now, there are other things too. You can save this article, you can email it to you. There is also display option, whether you only want the abstract, you want only PubMed this way, okay? But I tend to prefer the original abstract method. And here are all the different IDs. There's a PMID, PMCID, and a DOI. This is typically a link that directly links to the paper. One more thing is I like this cite option, okay? Because here, instead of manually doing it, you can download, you can choose the formatting. Now let's talk about Google Scholar. Let's see what's the difference. I have here AKI and Delirium. All right, let's see what comes up. So now you can see it's because it's Google and it's a search engine, it is able to detect AKI. I'm actually talking more about acute kidney injury, unlike PubMed in the other example. Okay, but if you want to be more accurate, you want to type the whole thing out, or you put quotation marks. Here, when you want to do advanced search, this is where you click the 3 lines here, click on advanced search, and right here is the similar to Boolean operators. Instead of they are not explaining and or, so exact phrase, which means your quotation marks, at least one of these words is like or, and without the words would be not. Okay, so it's similar idea. Okay. Okay, now let's get back to this page. Right, when you see here, you can filter by any time, custom range, sort by relevance, sort by date. Any type of articles, or you specifically want review articles, you can click that. Okay. And then now I want to highlight a few things here. You can save the article. You can cite the article. Okay. Here, you can choose the different way, the bib text, EndNote, RefWorks, or you can just copy and then paste, depending on what you need, depending on whether you use any reference manager tool. Now, next one is cited by 9. Okay, these are other papers that are citing this paper. So when you click this, you're seeing all the 9 papers are currently citing this paper, 9 results. Okay, and then you have related articles as well. Cited by, it gives me an idea of how influential the paper is. Okay, because this was cited by 9 people, and this is cited by 112 papers. So it shows that this is going to be a really relevant and important paper. Now, the cool thing about Google Scholar is you can also look at the PDF version. And now you can immediately see the PDF of the article. All right, there you go. That's the quick run through on Google Scholar. All right, now in this section, we're going to move on to the next. Now that you have searched and found multiple articles, the next step is to read and understand research papers. So first, I want to talk about challenges in understanding research papers. So the first thing is believing the conclusion blindly, okay? And the second challenge, struggling with the methods and results section due to unfamiliar jargon. Third, knowing only medical jargon but not research jargon, okay? Number four, unable to process all of the information. So now, how do you learn how to read papers effectively? So these are the 4 main steps from foundation all the way to the deeper levels, okay? First is to learn the research vocabulary. Number 2, understand the paper structure. Number 3, process individual parts of the paper. And number 4, understanding the 2 approaches to reading paper. Either is exploring versus mining. All right, step 1, learn the research vocabulary. So when you're first getting started, you have to know the common terms used in research paper. This is to build your foundation. So every time you see an unfamiliar term, for example, you go to the method section and you see sensitivity analysis, right? we perform sensitivity analysis. If you don't know what that means, look it up. Don't skip it. How do you look it up? You can Google it. You have dictionary, and now that you have ChatGPT, you can even look that up and ask to explain the concept even further. So now, although these large language models may not be fully accurate yet, you can use these as the foundation or the framework or where you can start and before you go into the main article. Step 2, understand the structure of the paper. Now, most clinical research or medical research papers follow the IMRED structure, which is introduction, methods, results, and discussion. And in terms of case reports, the case replaces the methods and results section. And then if you look at this method section, the different study designs have different method structure. So for example, in randomized controlled trials, you will have subsections talking about randomization, sample size calculation, effect size calculation. Cohort studies typically have a subsection on data source. And then basic science papers will have a subsection on reagents, mouse models, etc. At this time, I also want you to consider invisible structures. What I mean by invisible structures, sometimes you may not see the subheadings to represent a section. So for example, in the discussion section, the first paragraph typically is a summary of all the results. And then the middle paragraphs are the discussion of the key points. So these are the contradicting or supporting arguments. And then the last few paragraphs typically are limitations, strengths, and future direction. When you know the structure, whether it's explicit, subsections, or invisible structure, it really helps you speed things up on how to find the right information, and now you can read paper more effectively. Step 3, process individual parts of the paper. Now, this is the tricky part, and I would say the more difficult part, okay? Remember, the goal is to build a fund of knowledge in your mind. Don't just read it just to have your eyes looking through it, because, I can say I want to read 2 papers in half an hour, but, if I'm just scanning through, there's no point. So the goal is to understand the meaning, link it to your existing knowledge in your brain, and also to draw parallels in other settings. Here, if you can, summarize key points and create notes using your own words. And it can be at the margin of the paper if you like to use paper or in PDF, okay, or a separate note-taking app. And if you can't write it using your own words, it really means that you have not truly processed it. So this step, as I mentioned earlier, it takes time, it feels difficult and effortful. And really that is the goal. When the brain needs to feel the effort in order to know that it's something important to store in the brain. Right? So it may seem like a waste of time at first, but the information will last and you won't have to read the same paper so many times. Now I don't expect you to remember the paper the very first time you read, but if you put more effort the very first time, you not just you remember much longer, but you actually understand it much deeper. Now, step 4 is to understand the 2 approaches to reading. So there are 2 main things. One is exploring and another is mining. So what is exploring? So exploring is when you're just exploring the paper. You're reading the paper from start to finish, okay? You're trying to do a deep dive on one particular paper. And the goal is to explore the paper and see what is interesting or what's useful that will come out, okay? So I want to give an analogy. When you're going for a vacation in Portugal, in Lisbon, okay? And so when you're exploring, you walk around, explore to see what cafes or restaurants that catches your attention. And then, maybe you see one that has long lines, like, I bet that's popular, and you decide to join the crowd to try the restaurant. So that's exploring. You don't have any particular expectation. You just, whatever comes, I'm going to take it. Now, and another opposite will be mining, okay? So now, like mining for gold, you're very focused, where the goal is to extract specific valuable elements. And this strategy is typically used when you're looking for specific data, statistic, or quotation in the paper to support your claims. Now, going back to the vacation analogy, this is when you're very specific. You already know what you want. So for example, that day, maybe you're so tired, instead of walking around to see what food is available, you Google what's the best place to get Portuguese egg tarts in Lisbon. And then you Uber and go straight there. So mining is you go straight to the location and you know what you want. Now, the question is people ask me like, which is better? Okay, which method is better? They're really both important. You actually need to go back and forth depending on the stage of your research project. So for example, when I'm at the idea generation phase or when I'm writing the discussion section, I tend to go into this exploring mode, okay? I will read a paper. where I will summarize, I create notes, and also organize notes, and I'm thinking, okay, which one is important for my discussion section. Okay, when I'm looking for a specific reference or a data to support my claim, for example, in the introduction section, I typically go into more of the mining mode where, okay, let me find the statistics, let me find the incidents, and I find my answer in the paper, and then I bounce. All right, in this module, we will be talking about synthesizing literature to support the manuscript. Now, what is synthesis? The term synthesis means to combine separate elements to form a whole thing. So in literature, synthesis is the process of combining different sources and ideas to create a new text that demonstrates comprehension, analysis, and evaluation. And sometimes you may think, oh, it seems really complicated, okay? So when what it means by combining separate elements to form a whole is like cooking or baking. So you have multiple different ingredients, and when they combine and you bake the cake, it looks completely different, so it forms a new whole. So synthesis is the same, where you take process of different sources, different elements, different data of information, and then you combine them, now you have a new paper. So that's synthesis. Okay. Now, let's go deeper. Synthesis is not merely summarizing, okay? Because summarizing just restates findings from individual studies in isolation. Synthesis connects and integrates. It combines information from multiple studies to show relationship. And so instead of listing findings, synthesis highlights patterns, contrasts, and gaps in the literature. And the goal is to create a cohesive narrative that offers deeper insights into the research topic. So what are the steps in synthesis? So 3 simple steps. Number 1, you need to pull information. Number 2, collate information, which means you gather and combine information. And then 3rd, you summarize the information. All right, let's talk about pulling key information. So once you've read the article, the next step is to pull out key information. This information needs to be directly related to the specific part of your manuscript where it will be synthesized, where it could go into introduction, methods, results, or discussion. Now, this is a analogy I heard from one of the researchers. His first name is Ilya Shabanov, I think. And I went for his workshop, and he said a research paper is like a suitcase. And I thought this analogy was like the best analogy I've heard about a research paper. So really, when we think about a research paper, it's a suitcase full of information. And it's designed to pack all the information so it can be transported easily, transferred easily from PDF to PDF. But when to use the information properly for ourselves or in manuscript, you actually need to unpack it, all the information, and put it in the right place. Okay. For example, you unpack your suitcase, or you have your shoes, it needs to go at the side of the wardrobe. You have the toiletries, it goes into the bathroom. You have to unpack it, and then you can use it in the right place. Now, let's talk about unpacking your articles. Okay, so as you're reading through your introduction section of a particular article, here you're looking for specific statistics or quotes that define the problem or highlight the gap. And then in the method section, okay, oh, can I use this? Maybe I can use this detail to justify the variables or method in your own paper. And then when you look at somebody's results, you find specific data points or outcomes that can align with your own findings. That way, when you're writing this discussion, you can use it. And then in the discussion, okay, even though you may not use the exact thing, you can reference other studies that support or contradict your findings and provide mechanisms or explanation. The next thing I would recommend is to create notes while you read. This is not a very popular activity, okay? But trust me, I've done this several times, sometimes without writing notes and sometimes with writing notes. Creating notes takes more time upfront, but it's really worth it later when you come back and you have to reference things again and find all the information. So what I mean, as you read each article, create notes immediately. So identify which section of your manuscript this information fits, okay? So for example, you read something and then you find that this statistic may define a problem. So this one you immediately put under your introduction section. Then when you read an article, oh, this method is used in a similar study, goes into your method section, okay? And keep the notes brief but clear so that you know exactly where each piece of your information will go. Now that you've pulled out all the information, it's time to collate your information. All right. So what is collating? Collating means to gather and organize information from different sources. Okay, you're organizing things. So now you have pieces of information. You want to group them together. You group the notes by section of your manuscript. For example, introduction, maybe certain ones go into the method, certain one goes into the results section and discussion section. And then second thing, you not just group the notes, but you organize information in a way that helps you see patterns, trends, and relationship between different studies. Now, reviewing the collated notes also helps you see the big picture and see how each piece of information fits together across sections of your paper. So here's how a few ways you can collate information. First, you can either group studies by theme, questions, or topics. For example, if you're studying the impact of a particular intervention, you can group studies that evaluate similar interventions. And that way you can see common patterns and differences across studies more clearly. And you can actually create comparison tables or summaries. That way it makes it easier. So you can include key information like study design, methods, results, and conclusion. In this way, the table helps you quickly reference studies and see how they relate to each other. And then the third thing is to summarize information. So once you have full information, gathered, organized information, you want to summarize them, okay? And what does it do? It helps you distill the most important points from the research, helps you identify common themes and trends, highlight gaps in the literature, simplify complex data into digestible points, and also to build a clear narrative in your manuscript that connects the findings. How do you summarize effectively? You want to focus on the key points. What are the main findings of each study? And avoid summarizing every detail and stick to the most relevant points to your manuscript. Also look for trends. Do multiple studies show the same results? Are there any conflicting results? Because you want to highlight those for discussion section later. Also identify gaps. Are there areas where research is inconsistent or lacking? And these gaps can help justify your research focus. So this is an example of a written summary, okay? Study A here is my note, okay? I've created a note as I'm reading a paper. Study A showed a 20% reduction in delirium with intervention X. The study included 200 AKI patients in a randomized control trial and suggested strong potential for improving patient outcomes. And then in study B, no significant change in outcomes with intervention Y, a cohort study with 150 ICU patients, and the results suggested a need for future research. So now I have two notes from two separate papers, and I can write a summary. I can say this is an example. While some interventions like X show promise in reducing delirium, others like Y do not show significant benefit. Further studies are needed to clarify the most effective approaches. So this is kind of the step where you go from pulling information, writing notes, and then now creating a summary. What are the common pitfalls when synthesizing literature? The first one is over summarizing. Here is where people simply listing out what each study found is not really synthesis. I've seen that a lot when I'm reviewing papers. Sometimes inexperienced writer, the discussion will have like just blocks. Study once did this, and then they just summarize the whole paper. And then study two did this, and they summarized and found this. Okay, they're not really combining results or connecting studies. They're not really identifying the themes, similarities, and differences. Number two, not showing how the studies relate to one another. So give you some tips on how to do that. You can use phrases like in contrast to, similarly, building upon, or extending the work of. These are the words that help guide the reader through your synthesis and show how the studies relate to one another. And then the third pitfall, not linking back to your research. So when you're synthesizing, always tie the literature back to your own research question or findings. Now, the next thing that's really, really important is to keep things organized. So remember I was talking about writing notes. There's no point writing notes where it's all a mess, you have pieces of paper everywhere. So it's important to organize the notes. So question is, why should we organize our notes? And why do we write notes in the first place? The goal is to avoid double or triple work. So you really put in the work of reading, thinking, collating, and also synthesizing paper. So we don't want you to start from scratch later. So usually what happens is you are designing your project, okay? You do a lot of reading, you do a deep dive of literature review. And then 12 months after designing your project, you've collected the data, you recruited your patient, you've analyzed the data, and now it's time to write a manuscript. And here, you need quick access to your thoughts and data. So if you don't have good notes, you tend to be repeating the entire process, and you don't have a trigger to like, oh yeah, that's where I found that piece of information. So now you have to like restart everything again. Also, as you are reading papers, okay, you often have kind of random thoughts like this. So you're like, oh, this data will be perfect to show the extent of the problem. Maybe you should go. We should bring it into the introduction section. Or, oh, the result from this data will be useful when I'm writing the discussion section. Or sometimes I even have random thoughts. Oh, this is such a beautifully written phrase on the limitation. I'm going to use this similar idea. Okay, so if you don't write down these and organize these thoughts now, you just lose it as soon as when you're done writing the paper, and you definitely won't remember it when it's time to write your manuscript. Now, how do you organize things? So you want to organize key information, your notes, in several ways. First, I like to keep my statistics and epidemiology data in one side, okay? So every time I see a key stats or epidemiology data, I'll keep notes on key data to support. These are key notes and key data to support your research question. And they're essential for framing your introduction. So I'll put like, incidence rate here, prevalence there, what the guidelines says, everything related to statistics and epidemiology data into one section, okay? And then I will group things into a section where it's evidence for specific results, okay? I will group studies that support your result in one, group studies that support results two. That way you can directly reference them when writing your results section or actually discussion section. And then also organize my notes in terms of contradictory evidence. I'll group the notes on studies that contradict the findings. Okay. Again, I use this for discussion and to address limitation and discrepancies. Sometimes I also organize by supporting connections and keywords. So what I mean by supporting connections. So let's say notes that could show connections between X and Y. It helps you explain the relationship and strengthen your discussion point. So some example, connection or association between AKI and old age, acute kidney injury and old age. I'll see association between acute kidney injury and dehydration. Okay, so I'll see connection and I'll organize my notes and also organize my references that way. I sometimes also organize by keywords. For example, if these are papers that are related to methodology, I'll put keywords. This is for methodology, this is for study instruments, this is for patient outcomes, this is for risk factors. That way, when it's time to write, it's also easy to find studies that address specific aspect of my research. So here, I'm going to show you an example note you can create. So as I'm reading, okay, or as I'm preparing for the manuscript write-out in the literature search stage, I'm not writing yet. So this is the time when I collect my references, the articles I want to read, and quick summary on the article I've read. So for example, the title of this topic is Delirium in Patients with Acute Kidney Injury. I want to talk about incidence and outcomes. And so in the introduction section, I know I want to have some articles that talks about the extent of the problem. Okay, Gupta et al. 2023, delirium affects 30% of ICU patients. This is kind of my note after reading this paper. And then Rodriguez et al. In this paper, ICU patients with AKI have 20% higher risk of developing delirium compared to non-AKI patients. So here I already have my notes and my references, okay? And so I just keep doing this, and as I read more papers, then I'll just enter and put another point, another reference into this note. Now, for example, if you don't want to cite it like this, you don't want this to crowd it, what I tend to do as well, I kind of mentioned it earlier, is to put the citations, I'm going to make this bigger, citations at the site, okay? So for example, here, if I want to cite this area, I will put my citations here. That includes the ID, the last author, the title, and also the DOI. And so another example here. So you're going to see multiple articles, several, 3 or 4 articles. That way, when it's time, I don't lose any of these. Next step, organizing and managing your references. Why do you want to organize and manage your references? Avoid repetition and confusion. Also keep track of what you've read or cited. You want to stay efficient because well-organized references save time when drafting and revising, and also to maintain accuracy. So proper reference management helps ensure correct citation and avoids mistake in your book, in your references. Quick tools for managing references. I always recommend reference management tools. I know some older PIs, principal investigators, who like to use manual writing of their citation. That's just prone for mistakes. It's really tedious. So management tools include EndNote, Tarot, Mendeley. There are plenty of tutorials out on YouTube. Okay, so it really actually what you use, it depends on what is provided to you. So why these are important, because why you want to use a management tool is because you can organize, you can text, and then the references get updated automatically. When you move, like, oh, this citation down 2 paragraphs, or you delete 1 paragraph, so it will automatically update the number. Sometimes, depending on certain management tools, like Zotero, you can actually attach notes and write notes on it for quick or reference so that you can remember what it is about the article. Finally, you can also sync references or these management tools to your word processor. So for example, EndNote integrates with Microsoft or even Google Docs to ensure citations are automatically formatted and updated. So I'll give you 2 screenshots here. This is from my Microsoft Word. So I have one for EndNote, another for PaperPile. Google Drive, you have PaperPile, PaperPile. So and also there's Zotero and also Mendeley Chrome extension. So you think whichever you use, look for ways to integrate it or sync it into your word processor. Some quick best practices for organizing references. So group references by manuscript section. You can do that. You can assign references to introduction, methods, results, or discussion as needed. Remember when we were starting at the start, when we talk about search strategy, right? This is where you start thinking about what article. I tend to put my links and PMID or DOI articles into those sections, introduction, what articles I'm going to read. That way, when I need to go back to think about what articles, I will go back there, okay? Use keywords and tags. Keywords like statistical methods or outcomes. This will help you quickly locate relevant references and create folders or libraries into your in your management reference system. So another screenshot here, okay? So when you search for, this is an EndNote, okay? Different management system looks different, okay? This is my EndNote. If you search, you're going to have all these unorganized articles. So when you have done a lot of it, then you're going to see that you can scroll. It will be endless scroll of articles that you have searched in the past. So in order to avoid going through all this work of looking for things again, almost immediately I create buckets and also folders already. So you can see, remember I was talking about connectors, okay, AKI and age, AKI and anemia, and this tells me I actually have 9 papers in there. AKI, the association between AKI and delirium and dementia. So a lot of connection. This one is more outcome, AKI recovery, AKI with cancer, and then I have a bunch here on outcomes, post-AKI outcome, holistic, a bunch on study instruments, right? So you can organize however way you want, and see, you can drop your articles in there. That way, when it's time to go back, oh, where did I find that? You can look through here in your bucket to say, oh, I have all of my citations here that I can read again and look for it again. So it's really important to regularly update your reference. As new studies emerge, update your reference management with these additions to ensure manuscript stays current, and then review your citation to ensure they remain relevant and accurate. Also, maintain consistency throughout the writing process. Make sure to double check that all your studies mentioned in your manuscript are included in the reference list. and ensure citations are formatted correctly and consistently. But when you're using Citation Manager, this will be automated. That's why I always recommend that. Now, one key point, managing references as a group. So you may realize now most writing projects are done in a group, not a solo endeavor, right? You have a mentor, you're probably the first author, and then you have a mentor, and then you have like 3 or 4 co-writers or co-authors. And not everybody uses the same reference manager. And if one person uses EndNote, another person uses Mendeley, you're going to have formatting problems. And so to avoid that, usually you only assign one person who will be in charge of using Citation Manager. Okay, I typically let the first author do it because they are the one who will kind of wrap everything up. And so how do you manage that in between? You want to cite as you write. You can put a running list of citations or links in the comment section. So whenever I write, I put like a little comment. These are the citation. So I'm going to show you an example here. So instead of immediately citing, okay, I put at the here. Oh, this is the article. This is the PMID. This is the DOI. So these, another one here, things that have been instituted since the study started. So I have like 2 or 3 articles here with links and articles that I'm going to cite in the future. So that way, nobody's messing up with the formatting. When it's time, I'm the principal investigator and the first author, I will integrate this into a proper management listing. Okay, so now to summarize the whole section on literature review from start to the end, okay, it's the summary. First is understand what literature review means. Make sure you know the difference between the process versus the product. That way, when you're asking people, you're clear on what they're trying to tell you. Number 2, understand how to conduct a literature review that's specific to supporting manuscript writing phase. So first, you want to develop a search strategy. Don't just blindly download hundreds and thousands of paper. Have a search strategy first. Number 2, now you want to read and synthesize the information. And then third, organize the notes and reference. Now, if you're wondering whether AI tools can actually make literature reviews easier, you're not alone. There are plenty of tools out there, all promising to save you time and effort, but are they really worth the hype? I have a bit of a different take on it, so in the next video, we'll dive into what AI can and can't do and whether it's the right choice for your research. I'll see you there.